Welcome to my YouTube channel, Watercolor Impressions. This is continuation from Absolute Beginner series for watercolors. This week I'll show you guys how to take photographs for your own painting. Before we go, hit the subscribe button so you guys can get weekly video updates from our channel. And let's get started, guys. Whenever you want to work with photographs, you could either take it in mobile or camera. It's up to an artist's preference. I prefer in mobile because it reduces the details and shows what's important in the scene. Being said that, this picture was taken at my art market. In reality, the darks in the picture are not this darker. So we have to observe the scene when we take pictures, and it also recommended to do a lot of planar paintings and painting on location so that you can learn about values in the scene. Few tips before we jump onto the painting. Always crop your pictures so that your subject sits on the golden ratio. So what I mean by that, I have shown an image with red dots in it. So your subjects have to be sitting on either one of this, so it creates a beautiful composition. If you want to research further, look it up in Google, type in golden ratio, and it will show different kinds of golden ratio you can use for your composition. So look for interesting subjects. For example, in this image what I took, the interesting subjects are the light pole, which is peeking the shadows in front of our foreground. So that creates a beautiful lead-in for our painting. Capturing the mood is quite essential in your photos because that gives a nice harmony to our painting. I always push mood even further in my work to create a beautiful paintings. Quite obvious, the picture I have taken quite moody as well. It's in the early evening and after a rain, and there's a lot of sunlight coming through the midground and the foreground. Taking multiple pictures in multiple angles is quite essential too, because we can take certain elements from other pictures and we can put it together to create a beautiful composition. In this picture, I did take multiple angles because there is a lot of people walking around, so I want to capture certain elements from that. And let's jump on to the next one. This one is really important too, capturing people in your photographs. This helps to create depth in your scene and perspective in your scene, and it also provides scale in your painting. Providing scale in your painting is quite essential too, and because it shows how big your scene is, and it shows the viewer what's the whole scene is about. As an artist, I always take reference photos whenever I go out or I see something really inspiring. Here are a few examples of pictures I've taken of boats in recent years, and I also use these pictures for how to paint boats tutorial in my YouTube channel. So you go out and use these tips, and let's see what you can come up with. Moving on, let's take the reference and let's do a painting of it. So I usually keep my drawing really simple. And you can see I'm also drawing really free because I train my eye to see perspective from my reference pictures or on location. But if you're a beginner, feel free to trace it. That way you learn it, so next time you do it, you understand perspective a little bit better. And I also provide this drawing template and reference so you guys can download it and you can also follow with me. And the link is in the video description. So in the reference photo, you could see there's hundreds of details in our reference picture, but I minimize to really simple because we want to capture the mood and the essential elements in our scene. Because as a painter, we are telling a story. When people see this painting, they have to understand what the scene is about and where this was painted. So I finished the drawing and I drew whatever is needed for my painting to start with. So I'll go ahead and do my first wash now. But being said that, I've shown my process in my previous tutorials as well. Please feel free to go and check it out. It's the same process what I'm doing here. So the first thing I want to do is the clouds. The clouds is the background. So I start with the background, then I start from left to right. And for the cloud, you see at the bottom, I put yellow ochre to warm up the clouds, and it creates a glow in distance. In the picture, you can see that, whereas in reality, if you go on location, you could see that warmish glow exists in your location. And that's why you have to do some paintings on location so you can learn something about how everything works in reality. So I'll connect that clouds with the trees. And this is the first wash. What I mean by that, I'm painting the light wash first, then I'll layer it with the mid tones and the darker tones at the end. and I'm trying to connect the shapes as much as possible, and I'm leaving white bits for my tints. And that's a beautiful thing about watercolors. If there's any white thing exists in your scene, you can leave it as it is. And I always start with a light wash first. For the grounds, even though for the grounds it kind of looked a little bit of gray in the reference, but I warmed up the road so that it kind of creates that glow and in distance in the midground. And as far as for the midground, for the foreground, I introduced a little bit of darker value with a little bit of warmer tone, because the blues go in distance, it creates distance, and the warmer tones come in the foreground. So that way we can create distance and depth in our scene. If you want to learn how to create depth in your scene, check out my YouTube tutorial how to paint distance and depth in watercolors. Check it out. So now I'm painting the mid values for the clouds, and I'm also, if you want to learn how to paint clouds, I also have a tutorial for it, how to paint clouds, so you guys can go and check it out. So I'm just taking my tissue paper and getting rid of some of the paint from the clouds so that it kind of gives that stormy clouds in distance. So I went ahead and added some mid-tones in our painting, and you can also see I created a little bit of depth in my painting, even though in the picture it kind of looks a little bit darker, because it looks darker because it's against the white light. And I simplified the trees which are in distance in the background, because when a viewer sees this painting from far and they don't even see all those details in it, so I simplified it in a way that it's easier to do and it's easier to read as well. And when it comes to adding figures, the figures in the midground, I usually don't put that many details. The figures which are in the foreground, I put more details. And this is also another way of creating depth and distance in your painting as well. So I'm adding the details for the tent, which is on the second tent. I'm trying to keep it really simple as possible, yet it reads really good. And in the foreground, the table, which is super dark, and I want to do it really dark because that brings that old tent in the foreground, and that's our foreground element. And you can see I also added two more figures, which is close to the second tent. It also creates a really interesting element in our scene. So I'll go ahead and do the rest of the figures. So I went ahead and finished the figures. Maybe I'll glaze over it once we add all the details. So there are a few things left. Once we add the shadows, this scene will come alive. And I'm adding the shadow for the second tent and third tent. And this is the tent which is in the foreground. I also simplified the shadows in such a way that it creates that impression. And now there's a tree which arcs to this tent. And whenever I paint trees, I treat it as a shape instead of thinking as a tree. Whenever you're thinking you're painting a tree and you're doomed, you don't know where to start and where to end. And I try to keep it as a shape so that way it's easier for me to do it. I also combine the shadow with the trees, and that also creates beautiful shadows on the tent too. So now I'm adding the shadows on the foreground tent, which connects the table, which connects the chair and everything together. And I am adding the shadows for the second tent and third tent, and I also add the shadows for the figure as well. And I'll keep building the shadow, and if something is not darker, I'll just glaze over again to make it darker so it comes in the front. You can see as soon as we add the shadow, the whole scene came alive. And whenever you paint, think everything, whatever you're painting is light and shadows. Even though when you try to paint carefully, leaving some white bits in a painting, there are sometimes you have to bring back some of the highlights. So the easiest way to bring back highlights is using gouache paint. You can also use Chinese white with no water in it. That also works, but I personally prefer gouache, and it's also up to artist preference. And you can see I'm trying to bring back some of the forms from the clouds as well as the light which is in the background. And I also saw that when I squinted my eyes, I felt that the trees lacked some of the details in the midground. So I'm going to bring back a little bit of trees at the back, and I'm also trying to merge that with the background, and I also try to bring back some of the highlights in the trees. So we are officially at the end of our painting. Now it's your turn. Take my photograph and take my drawing template and let's see what you can come up with. If you ended up painting this painting, send it to me, and I'll love to share it with my subscribers. Thanks again for watching this how to paint from photographs video tutorial with me. If you want me to cover any other subjects in watercolors, write me at watercolorimpressions@gmail.com or comment below. And let me know what you guys think about this painting in the comment section too. Before you go, hit the subscribe button so you guys can get weekly video updates from our channel. And good luck with the painting, folks.